DuVernay's Queen Sugar. And since then, she has directed on Greenleaf, The Red Line, Hentified, Little America, 13 Reasons Why, and DuVernay's latest, Cherish the Day. So thank you so much, Aurora, for joining us in this conversation. Meera hails from Jersey, now lives in LA. Her last feature played at Sundance. It was called Equity. And her first feature, Farrah Goes Bang, premiered at Tribeca in 2013, where it won the Nora Ephron Prize. Meera has directed TV shows such as Glow, Halt and Catch Fire, The Magicians, Outlander, The Terror, Man in the High Castle, The Walking Dead, and Snowfall. And Meera was also a 2014 fellow of the Fox Global Directors Initiative. So y'all have been very busy, and we're excited that you made time for us, because the focus of this conversation tonight is going from indie filmmaking into TV directing. I just wanted to jump right into that. And please remember, for those of you watching, that if you have questions, you can always write them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get to them. But just to start off, maybe each of you could tell us about your experience getting into television, how that happened. You know, both of you have made these very beautiful and personal first feature films, and kind of just tell us the trajectory. What motivated you to get into TV, and how did you get that first break?
You want to go, Meera?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess, I mean, motivated, I was certainly motivated financially initially, you know, like, I think when I saw, I mean, but like, it was all part of like a larger, like when I was making, even in between these like 2 independent films I made, I saw that like there were filmmakers like, you know, the Lynn Sheltons of the world that really, like, you saw that there was a model of like kind of making a life as a filmmaker where you could make direct television and also make your own work. And that's kind of what inspired me to want both, you know. So, you know, while I was pursuing indie film, I did that lab at Fox that was really geared towards trying to get an episodic gig. But it wasn't until after I made my second film and actually got like an agent basically and some reps around me that could help me connect the dots for me in terms of getting that work that that was finally able to happen. But even then it took a lot of like campaigning and meeting people and a lot of drinking water bottles, and you know, as much as you need to do to get that first episode, it really only kind of solidified after I made that second film.
For me, let's see, motivation. Honestly, like I never really saw myself in television. I thought I would strictly live on the fringes of filmmaking and in the indie space. That's where I envisioned myself since the very beginning, because of, you know, the type of stories that I wanted to tell and my commitment to those. And when I would look at the industry, the television industry, I really had a hard time finding myself within that space, or filmmakers that look like myself within that space. And I also, as I was coming up and working on my feature, I just kept like viewing panels that were like very discouraging to independent filmmakers when it came to doing a crossover to television. It was always like, it's really hard. And, you know, it's rarely happens. And so I just was like, you know, I'm just not going to even put any attention on that. And I'm just going to try to make my feature films. And so, when I finished my Mosquita y Mari, I hopped on my second one. I was really trying to get it off the ground, and I was struggling again to get the funding for it. And I was really discouraged by it. And I wasn't really paying attention to some of the changes that were going on in the television world, because there were shifts happening and I was kind of hearing about it, but really wasn't paying attention. And then I literally got a DM, a Twitter, you know, direct message from Ava DuVernay asking for my number. I had like literally liked a tweet of hers, and then I got like bing in my Twitter box, And I was like, what? That's supposed to be a mistake. And she was like, what's your number? I want to check in with you. And I was like, okay, here's my number. And she called me, and she changed the game for me, really. I mean, she just put her show and the TV world right in front of me and was like dangling the carrot. Come do this. And I was like, I don't know if I could do it. I've heard these panels and it's so hard. And she was like, shut up. You've made a feature film. You can do it. I believe in you. Come. And it shifted everything. So it was that's how it happened. And I've been in the TV space pretty much ever since.
So can we talk about what was your first TV show that you directed?
So the first show I ended up getting was, there was no, this is why it was so, like, I was going on so many meetings on so many different types of shows. The show I ended up getting was like kind of had nothing to do with the films that I made. It was this like sci-fi show on the Sci-Fi Network called Blood Drive that was about flesh-feeding cars drag racing across America. And like nothing I had done would speak to the fact that that was a specialty of mine, but ended up being like a crash course education in every department. When you do like a kind of genre show like that, you just have like you're interfacing with so many different elements of filmmaking that it was kind of it was the best case scenario because it was a new show. It was Sci-Fi Network. It was kind of smaller budget. It was in South Africa. It was like, and nobody was watching us. Like it was the best kind of way to step into it because it felt very like kind of almost like bootstrappy in the way it was made.
Yeah.
What I was used to doing. Yeah.
And so for both of you, you said crash course, and that was what I wanted to ask about next. How much did it feel like, okay, these skills that I acquired directing indie films are transferable, and how much did it feel like I'm in a new realm here? And what did you feel like you really had to figure out on the fly, and what were you able to take from your previous experience?
Yeah. For me, it was the amount of time that I had to prep, a 60-page script, or a little less than that, wasn't something I had experienced before in indie film. Like for me, you can prep a feature film for freaking years because there's no funding coming, right? So what can you do but prep the film, just like, and hoping that the money's going to fall into place. Even with the short, like it's rare when it's that, you have such a short amount of time to prep that film. So for me to walk in and have 7 days to prep this script, was challenging. And so I had to figure out a shorthand, and I'm still working on that shorthand. It takes time. So that to me was what was the most uncomfortable about stepping into my first episode. And then what felt very familiar and very comfortable was the hustle and like thinking on your feet in the moment, because you can plan all you want and you come on set and stuff doesn't always work out the way you planned it. And so for different reasons, and that's very indie world to me, things shift, things change, and you have to think on your feet. And that's something that I felt really comfortable with. And also just that that time is, your biggest antagonist, and you're always sort of fighting against the clock. And so I was used to moving fast when we were shooting. I could do that. I can move fast. I can think on my feet. So that to me felt super familiar. And I was like, hey, okay, yeah, I could do this. So so that's how it worked for me.
Yeah, I mean, so much of that is similar in my experience. Like the hustle, exactly what Aurora said about like just that translated so easily, when the pressure of like only having an hour left in your day and still needing to complete like 2 pages of or whatever it is, it almost seemed quaint, some of the problems compared to how it can be in indie filmmaking when when your only light is sunlight, when you don't actually have like, like 4 grip trucks worth of equipment outside that can save you, like so it was so much easier in so many ways. But the part of it that's challenging was stepping into, other people's visions, right? Like that's so much of what the job is in terms of like stepping into a showrunner's vision, stepping into, you know, trying to, I always compare it to like, you know, just traveling in a foreign land and having to pick up a language, you know, like, and that's what the prep period is about, and only having 7 days an episode. Or in my first episode, I was block shooting too, so there were 7 days each. So I had like 14 days, but it was like a whole lot of material to prep that it just felt like I was in some sort of immersion course of like what the language of the thing was going to be. So just keeping your head above water, you know, in terms of feeling like you're a part of things, let alone in charge of things. I mean, that's the hardest. I think that was the hardest part. It continues to be the hardest part for me.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about that as far as stepping into working with a crew, because again, that seems so different from like a baby that you've nurtured for years and you've like so carefully put the crew together, probably, versus in TV, you might be stepping into a crew that just worked with a different director, and what you've learned about that along the way.
Yeah, that I was gonna say that's probably the other super challenging thing, is that you inherit the crew. Whereas in indie filmmaking, you spend a lot of time finding your tribe, right? They're gonna deliver that vision with you, and so that's super different. And I mean, with the amount of time I have, I always try to reach out to my crew, especially my cinematographer, especially my production designer, or the line producer, the AD, and I'm always trying to be in communication with them and connect with them, not just around the work, but just as a human being, you know, and just so we have that, like, okay, like I see you, you see me. I don't always get that, and that's okay. And that way I know who I'm working with. I know it's not going to be like we're pals, you know, it's just going to be work. But I try to find a window where I can just kind of decipher who I'm working with ahead of time. So that's something I try to do. I also try to look at the work they've done so I can talk about the stuff that they've done and connect in that way. Those are some of the things that I try to do, but it's, you know, it's tough. You're always having to adapt to other people's, you know, visions, other people's rhythms. And so you have to really learn how to be super flexible and flow with the rhythm of the set that you're stepping into. Yeah.
Varying degrees of difficulty with that, right? It just depends on like the environment and the show. Well, I mean, I definitely think there's like, there's the hardest is when on shows where the DP is, there's only one DP and you don't even get to prep with the DP. But at least like, I feel like there are opportunities when you're on a show where that relationship can at least like foster itself while you're prepping the thing, to feel like by the time you get on set, the thing we're thinking about is going to happen. You know, it's like that relationship I find to be one of the most crucial, like kind of differences, and it's different on show to show.
I didn't know that when I was on Queen Sugar. We're super blessed to have 2 DPs to work with. So I had my own DP. I'm deep in prep. Conversations are happening. It was awesome. Like it was what we were able to create in such a short period of time. And then when I went on to the next show, that didn't happen, and I didn't know. Like I was like, "Where's my DP? What? Oh God, okay." Like that just threw me off, you know. And then it's just being, again, you have to adapt to every show. Every show is different. So
yeah. But it's so hard because then you don't have anyone to externalize that conversation you're having in your head when you're on the scouts, and start talking to yourself a lot.
Yeah.
So have you, you know, I guess there's a couple friends I've had who've said that it's hard. Once you're in TV, it's actually hard to shift back and forth between features and TV. Is that something that either of you have tried at this point or thought about? Does it feel that you kind of, once you're on the wheel, you have to stay on the wheel to keep your gigs coming?
I don't know. That's like a question I'm trying to figure out in real time. So it's kind of hard.
Because Meera, your TV directing has all happened after Equity, you said?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Well, maybe this is a question for part 2, because I was going to ask also, you've gained all these kind of skills. I was going to ask what's transferable about directed TV going back to features.
I know, that's the thing, because I always have this conversation with myself, because I made that first film of like a Kickstarter campaign with friends from film school, and I'm like, I could do that again, but like then I think I'm selectively remembering how painful that was, you know, like, or not remembering, you know, how hard that was. Now that I've like had the resources and had like, you know, been able to shoot things with that level of support that you have on these shows, but it's a tough one, because it's like, yeah, you want to be able to go back and forth, and it's so possible, but
yeah, I definitely want to go back and forth. Like, that's always been my dream, you know, like, to me, I see television. I mean, originally when I got into it, I was like, okay, I'm going to get paid to like play with toys I've never been able to play with, right? With budgets I've never had, in different genres. Like, to me, that's exciting. And I see it as like, I'm packing up like an arsenal of a bunch of tools that one day I'm going to use when I, you know, develop another feature. So it's always like in service of like going back to make that feature is how I see it, and building relationships with people in the TV world that also have a foot in the film world. So, you know, I feel like it's possible and it's there, and I'm trying to position myself where, you know, with this experience and these relationships, that I can get, you know, my next feature off the ground. And I am writing, and I'm in the midst of trying to find that. So I'm super hopeful, and I'm hungry. Like, I'm ready to do that. Like, I love playing in other people's kitchens and cooking it up and with other people's recipes, but I have a bunch of recipes that I want to bring to my own kitchen, you know. So I'm really yearning for that, you know. So I hope to be able to balance the two. I cannot say that I have succeeded yet, because I'm just in the middle of trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay. I would also say though, like, I think TV is a space that is becoming like a kind of canvas for independent filmmakers. I mean, the best, you know, independent film I saw over quarantine was I May Destroy You, but it's not an independent film, right? It was made by HBO Max. So it's like, I don't know, I think that is also, there's just, these definitions are almost not even worth thinking about too much, as this stuff changes so much in real time.
Yeah. Aurora, I wanted to go back and ask you a question. You said, you know, your first episode of Queen Sugar, because you'd seen these panels, it was like, oh, TV directing's so different, you know, that you struggled with confidence going into that first one. Did you feel after you got through one show that you were like, all right, I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I definitely went in super hesitant, with a lot of nerves and a lot of stake. I mean, I'm on this show, and my boss is Ava. This is her first series. I want her to win. You know what I mean? Like, I put that weight on myself. I was like, I really got to knock this out of the park. And so I put a lot into that first episode, and you know, still nervous, not knowing how it was going to turn out. But by the end of it, I definitely came out of it going, oh yeah, I can work in this space. I can do this. And I get paid, you know, like that was like so exciting for me. I never had a paycheck like that, you know, making film. And so yes, I came out knowing that this was something I wanted to explore more. No.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious about how you've experienced and managed racism and sexism that exists in the industry, in particular in TV, where that's come up. And I guess my question is, like, has it come up more in TV for you, or actually does it feel all the same as it was in indie when you were doing indie filmmaking?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Sorry.
That's a panel.
It's a panel in and of itself.
Yeah. It's a series of panels right there. But for me, like, I feel like I have been very intentional with who I work for and with, for the most part. And I know not a lot of people feel like they have a choice, you know, but I I came into it with this mentality after doing Ava's show that, yeah, I have a choice. I can say no. You know, if I'm not vibing off the show, the content, what they're putting out there, why not? Why not say no? I got to trust. If this door opened with Ava, another door will open. And so I've continued to have that mentality, and I really actively look for creators that are saying something super interesting. They're people of color at the center, either in the content or the writers, or both. Ideally. Sometimes I find myself on shows where I become like the police, like the Latinx police, you know, or the queer police. And so I'm like there to kind of check what has been written. And so that can sometimes feel like a lot of weight, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations that suddenly I'm responsible for, that I have to have with these showrunners. So I don't particularly like that, but at the same time, I'm like, well, shit, you know, I'm here. I'm gonna call it out, and I'm glad I'm here, because if I wasn't, I don't know who would call it out. So you know, in those ways, I've sort of dealt with particularly the racism and the homophobia, and on set, like, you know, I just carry myself in a way where I'm like, don't even try it, homie.
I bet.
I wear my Oakland Raiders hat. No, don't get to me, man.
That's what you gotta do. Yeah. I think, like, if I think about, the most upsetting, I generally avoid those kind of shows as well. Like, what you're saying, Aurora, like the power of no, like I typically, if there's a show where brown people are playing terrorists, I'm gonna avoid it. You know, like, I'm just not gonna put myself in that situation, because I'll probably get upset. So why bother? You know, like, so that's the power of no. But also, like, I do find the times that I've gotten the most uncomfortable in experiences on set so far on these shows have been experiences dealing with sex scenes where there are like not enough women around the process for like, or that are requiring something out of an actress where it doesn't feel like there are enough women around the process. And, you know, like, I could think on varying details of what that's meant in various situations, but that's generally the scenario in which I've been made to feel the most uncomfortable, when I'm like the only kind of female voice in a room when an actress is being required to do something. But that's changed a lot actually in the past year or two, because intimacy coordinators have become so kind of standardized. So I feel like actually but that first year I was on a few shows that just like where I was in these situations where I was like not being told, or it wasn't being made clear to me why like certain nudity was required, but somehow I was in charge of executing on it, you know, like, and that just was the most personally demoralizing of my experiences, you know, being put in that situation. But I do think that's changing. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to a question in our chat box, and then I have some more. What is responsible for that mindset that allows you to be intentional and have the ability to say no? And what triggers any doubts or temptations that you may have when considering such projects?
The doubts. I think for me, the mindset to say no, is that the question? Like how to come about that?
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of work on yourself. It's a lot of unlearning what you've been taught to believe about yourself, that you got to say yes and you always need to act, you know, in desperation, and make choices out of like, because I don't have any other choices. You know, I feel like for me, like life is too short. There's a lot of harm that has been done out in the world via media and, you know, representations, particularly of my communities, you know, I came into filmmaking very much committed to wanting to shift that. and it is not something that has left my heart or my soul. So, you know, so it is a part of my DNA. And so when I come across stuff that is problematic, it feels to me like an easy no, because it just doesn't align with who I am at my core, right? So, and the times that I have doubted or even considered, I think have been maybe the financial angle to it plays sometime a role. But even then, I just trust that it's going to work out and that I know how to stretch a penny out. And so that's how I've kind of handled it, or how I've come to kind of lean on the no and the power of no in that mindset.
Yeah, not making decisions out of fear. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you have a tremendous amount of integrity, Aurora. That's the thing. That's what you're not saying. It's easier for people that have integrity. I mean, I do too. I don't mean to.
Yeah, you do. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, a lot of self-respect, I think, for sure.
And do you find in making these decisions that you kind of get stronger in your beliefs, or was it just kind of something these decisions came up and you're like, that's not me, I'm not doing that? Or is it something that you're kind of continually having to remind yourself who you are, I suppose?
I think you learn too as you do, because like, I mean, I didn't necessarily know what questions to ask myself early on, you know, like, and I think the more I did, the more I was like, okay, that's a trapdoor to that kind of situation. And that's the, you know, like, so you have to also be forgiving of your own process and learning what your boundaries are.
Right. Okay, I'm going to the chat box again. Aurora, what is some advice you have for young Chicana filmmakers to get into the industry?
For young Chicana filmmakers, yeah. You know, I think that I think it's, let's see. You know, I can only speak to like my own experience and that I can share. And for me, what has been really critical has been creating within community, and community with mostly my sisters, queer sisters of color, and really being in that kind of space where I felt validated in terms of the stories that I wanted to tell and who I wanted to center, and that I didn't have to explain it to anybody. Like that was always really a big deal. And surrounding myself with these sisters who also were critical about the content, you know, like about the story and the characters, and were afraid to like push me to become the best storyteller that I could. Like that was the ideal people that I surrounded myself with, and also shared my gripes about like the industry or how hard it is to be an artist and not to come from a background where your parents are paying for your rent and stuff like that, you know, like, so for me that was really important. And so I was able to create in those spaces with very little, but with a lot of heart and a lot of commitment and vision. And so I've always throughout my career have looked for that, for community. So I did that before I did my feature. I had community during my feature, and sometimes that tribe shifts. And I have a tribe now in the TV world, and sisters that, you know, right now I'm connecting with other women TV directors weekly, and we just like hold space for each other and share like really critical information to help us succeed and to win together. And so I think that to be proactive in that way, and to find that community, to find those resources, and not to be afraid to reach out to filmmakers like myself, you know, just to have a conversation. Like I'm always down for that. I think it's so important. I didn't necessarily have that when I was younger, and that was always really hard. But when people did reach out, it made a huge difference, because it unlocked this source of like information and knowledge that I was hungry for, because I had no idea what that world was like. You know, what does it mean to make an indie film? What does it mean to be in television? And folks always made themselves available to me to share those nuggets. And so, but I had to reach out. I also had to like be proactive in that way. So, so I encourage that.
Meera, has community and kind of working with friends or your tribe, has that been something that's been integral to your career as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, right at my first film, right out of film school, that was just made with like my dearest friends from college, and both prior to that and then film school as well. And then, yeah, and my second film as well to a lesser extent, but like, I mean, definitely in my indie work for sure, like that was the only way it could happen. And, you know, I mean, I told Kat this about like what y'all have going on in Austin. I'm so envious of this like kind of like film community, you know. LA can feel so driftless in terms of its sense of community, because it's an industry city, you know. So I think that's the only way you can really, I mean, you can't make films in a silo, you know, it's not like writing a song. It's it relies on, you know, we rely on each other, I think, in all ways, in many different types of ways to make it happen, to speak something into being and all that stuff, you know. So in all the ways, community, I feel like, is the most important thing in terms of fostering your sense of self as a filmmaker. Yeah.
Okay, chat box is blowing up. Let's see. What advice do you have for directors who are the youngest or least experienced person on a set with veterans of their craft? It's a great question.
I think this, I mean, you know, there's this, I feel like, myth that you're supposed to know everything as a director, right? Like that is like, I think one of the things that really gets busted up by doing, like, you're supposed to be surrounded by people that are better than you. That's actually how you know you're doing it right, you know? So I don't think it makes necessarily a difference if you approach it with that kind of framework to begin with.
Aurora, what do you think? They should get a Raiders sweatshirt?
Oh yeah,
Raider?
definitely Raiders.
Stars.
What'd you say?
But in your experience, you know, when you've gone on set with, have you gone on set and felt like, on a TV show, and felt like, oh, there's all these veterans here and I'm less experienced? How do you manage those feelings?
Yeah, I don't think I walk in with that mentality. I walk in knowing that I have a lot to offer, you know, through my lived experiences, and I know that the people around me have a lot to offer. So I get excited about what they're going to bring to the table. I try not to do this hierarchical thing. Obviously, if there's like a veteran actor, you know, I often am like, you know, very humbled by what they have. There's so much knowledge, and I respect that for sure. But I you know, I don't bow down or nothing like that. You know, it's we all bring something to the table, you know, regardless of age or experience, and so that's where I live mentally.
How important is it to get the right agent or manager? That's part one of this question. And is there actually a way to learn more about these professionals beforehand? I guess before you actually sign with somebody. This is always a big question.
I know, it's so hard.
It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Spill it.
Mixed feelings. I do think that it's important to understand how they can work for you, or what they can tend to do, to have some sort of understanding before you sign up with anybody is super important. I still am trying to figure out what agents do. I'm like super blessed to have a really wonderful manager, but this manager came through someone that in the film industry at Sundance, who I adore and trust wholeheartedly. And when he was like, you need to meet her, she's pretty amazing, I was like, okay, this isn't a typical, you know, manager agent that you might think of stereotypically, or as I think of. And so, so I was really lucky to connect with someone who is just a wonderful person and really understands myself, me, my politics, everything I'm about, and doesn't like, she challenges me, but in a way that is smart and is cool, but she doesn't challenge my politics, you know what I mean? So it's a good combo, but yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Meera, have you figured them out yet?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, this pandemic has been useful. I've been doing a lot of soul searching and making some rearrangements in my life, but you know, because it's hard. You just don't know. It's very hard to know who these, you know, like it's hard to know why this system exists the way that it does. I will say that they're very important at a certain point by way of getting these kind of jobs. So however they come into your life or out of your life, if that happens, it's kind of a necessary part of the equation. That's it. I mean, there are ways. I mean, like you just have to feel the vibe off of it, and you know, like there's a lot of, you know, like they're the salesman part of things. I always think of them as like the kind of investment bankers or the financial, you know, they're like the Wall Street of Hollywood in terms of like they deal in their business is very kind of is very intangible because they're not actually making anything the way we're making things, right? The same way money kind of moves on Wall Street, and so it's hard to know what they do. But there's a, you know, like they're so embedded and so necessary a part of the conversation, and they do connect a lot of the right dots for people. And there are really good versions of it out there. There are really passionate managers, especially, and agents out there that really have changed people's careers. I mean, my agent's awesome, and she definitely changed my. I mean, she made that first job happen. It wouldn't have happened without her, you know. But you know, like there, you hear the horror stories too, and it's the wilderness. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I found, and Aurora, you said this, is like when you found the manager you loved, she came recommended. And again, it's like going back to your community and your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you know somebody who's represented by the person, and it's all that kind of thought and confidence where you try to learn as much as you can, because it is hard to find out otherwise. Someone wrote, it seems that in independent film you have so much more creative control. Do you feel that you give that up in TV? Of course, pay is nice, but do you maintain your control by being selective of which projects you choose to be involved with? So does it feed you in the same way, or does it feed you in a different way, creatively? Or does it feed you literally because you can pay your bills?
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, like, you know, the meat of it is all directing, right? You are taking things, words that are on paper, words that existed, that were drafted in a writer's brain, your own or someone else's, and you're visualizing it on screen. I mean, it's the craft of filmmaking at its elements. Everything else is just variations, you know, like on context, but it's all the same in terms of the skill it's requiring of you. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I do like tend to live in the streamer cable side of things, because I feel like thus far my experiences on these shows and with these showrunners is that they tend to be a lot more creative. The conversations tend to be more about the art sometimes. And that's exciting to me. I did only one network show, and I felt like I was just a part of this machine that was running, you know, and I got thrown in there and I'm in it doing my part, and then I got spit out, you know. I don't necessarily like to feel that. I like to feel like I have at least can have some interesting conversations with folks and bring some of my stuff into it. And I'm also fed by other people's visions, you know, and like learning from them and like trying to produce something that they see in their head that's on paper, as Meera was saying, and like, and just trying to bring that to life is exciting and creative, for sure. And I also think that anthologies lend for more creativity for like standalone episodic anthologies when you're making like a short film, which I got to do once and loved it, and have actually been on some shows where I get episodes that feel quite a bit of like a standalone episode. And I might be like, I'm sort of maybe given a little bit of leadway artistically with those episodes. And so that's been very cool. And want to do more of that stuff because I can bring more of myself to it.
Yeah.
So
it's also a slight myth that making independent film, you have creative control. You're constantly restrained by resources, like like there's not this like kind of Goldilocks kind of thing where you get, TV money to make your indie film, like that's, I feel like actually what you're talking about, which would be the perfect situation.
Yeah.
I want to ask, because someone said this and I had the same question. Do either of you have shows you want to sell where you'd be the showrunner and also direct? I mean, now that you've been working in TV, also, do you have TV shows, dream projects that you're interested in doing? Or would if you were doing another personal project, would it be a feature?
Yeah, no, I think I have a ton of those kind of ideas, but I think that is an increasingly like kind of real thing that's happening in TV, the kind of showrunner, director person, so I think TV's a really expanding space in that way. In my experience.
Aurora, do you have a TV pilot or a show that you want to get off the ground?
Maybe. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Yeah, I'm working on something right now that I'm writing. And we'll hopefully be pitching very soon. So yes, I am expanding my vision of where I can, tell stories and create. And originally TV wasn't where I imagined myself creating my own stuff, but now I definitely have opened up to that idea and am moving forward with that. So I am, but I also have a feature film that I'm out trying to raise funds on, and also a documentary. So I'm like, I definitely, my hunger is just growing. It's growing. And I've been in television working for other people. And I'm like, I want to be my own boss. I want to be my own boss. Like that keeps coming back. So, but I have to create that work. Like I haven't really come across it. Like scripts don't come to me where I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is for me. Rarely do I get a script written by another person that I'm like really into. So I'm writing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do either of you serve as mentors in one way or another? And if so, where can we find information about that? You have like 100 people who are wanting to know if you will mentor them by the end of this panel. Myself included.
Oh my God. Yes, I have mentored quite a bit. I mostly, what I get excited about is mentoring when I have a project in the making. And I think that's the best way I can teach someone. I did that on my feature film, Los Quitemari. We had a mentorship program specific to the youth of that area. And I would continue to do that with anything that I am, the creator on. And then I just, just young people that I've come across. Usually they are women of color, queer women of color, trans people of color. Like I'm very specific about who I'm working with, knowing very well that, the resources aren't always there, or the bridges to that knowledge are lacking or broken. So I really try to make myself available for folks coming from my communities in particular. So, but the stuff that we're sharing now is what I would share one-on-one. So this is the mentoring right here. Like you're getting it. It's right here.
That's what I was gonna say, because people always ask me like how to break into TV, and the thing is, there's no one way, right? And also, more often than not, it kind of is this kind of the unexpected journey that kind of gets you there. And so you just need to keep making your stuff. And that's what I say to like anyone that poses that question, is like, you just need to kind of just make stuff however you can make stuff, and just let your journey unfold the way it will.
Yeah.
I'll buy you a mug that says something like that.
Yeah. Michelle, can I keep asking questions? Is there going to be like a buzzer? Because I have like 5 more questions.
We have still some awesome questions in the chat. So
Okay.
if they're like piled up now because
I know it's hard for me to
like so hungry to learn. There's a couple of awesome ones that are way in the back. I love this one. Has moving from indie film to television improved your filmmaking?
For sure.
For sure. Yeah. It's funny that you were both like, absolutely. You don't get a lot of these toys making indie films.
Yeah, yep. I always tell the story that my first day on Queen Sugar, my first day of production, I was standing as the DP, and there was a big ass lighting structure figure there that I thought was a crane, because I had never seen a crane before. And I was like, oh my God, I got 2 cranes. And he just like smirked. He's like, those aren't cranes. I was like, ooh. You know, that was my first day. And it was just like, that's how it's been. I just have had access like never before. And that's been incredible. But also just learning, like being immersed in story and character, and working a lot with actors, and like just nonstop in that way, is I'm flexing that muscle, and that's been wonderful. You know, it's huge.
Right, like you get to be on set a lot, which in between indie features, it can be years.
Oh yeah, absolutely, years. Yeah. And you can get rusty.
Right.
You can get rusty. And also like working in different genres, right? Like,
oh yeah. I mean, not only has it improved me as a filmmaker, I think it's changed me as a filmmaker. Like I didn't necessarily think about working in genre or like making a genre film prior to having like done a bunch of work in sci-fi and horror now in TV. And now I'm like, that I want to do that. Like I want to write that, you know, like that's part of that's merged into my own sense of myself by doing. I think it's also because, you know, so those stories have kind of existed in such siloed spaces, but now it's like expanding and kind of their points of view. And
wow, that's so great that it allowed you to explore another part of yourself that now it's kind of been activated. Have you been working?
You going in?
Oh,
there was one question way from the way that I wanted to get to real quick. Do y'all have any tips for working with composers? And do you give them references? Do you really hone them in on a feeling? How do you do it?
Go for it.
But no, I want to hear you first.
No, you do. Well, I mean, I haven't had a chance to work with a lot of composers, to be honest with you, but on my feature, it was very immersive. A lot of references. I actually, I'd never really talked to musicians before. Like I'd never had the money to be able to have a composer on a short. So on my feature, when I did have one, I was like, how do I translate what I hear in my head? And I was like, okay, I'm just going to use like just some keywords. And then I said, you know, I said those keywords, and then I was like, but I also really want you to walk through the neighborhood. I want you to immerse yourself in this world and hear some of what I'm hearing. And also I just straight up was very clear about what I didn't want. So I think that also helped him, where I was like, I don't want the Spanish strumming guitars, like none of that. And he was like, okay. So yeah, just a lot of conversation, references, very immersive style is what I like.
Did you start working with the composer before, like early in the process, or after?
No, yeah, I did. In terms of Yes, I did. But I didn't get to hear stuff until I was in post. But I
Yeah.
had him doing that homework prior.
Oh yeah, while you were shooting and stuff.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, because that's what I found, like with working with and it was just in my films too that I worked with composers, not in this TV space, but is that same thing where I brought them in before we even started shooting, and they gave me stuff and I gave them stuff, and so by the time I was editing, like they had already been a part of creating the palette of temp music. So, and then by the time it was then handed off for them to actually score, you know, they had been so much a part of creating what we were even editing off of, or establishing what we were even editing off of, that it was like a seamless, we had been speaking the same language at that point for so long in terms of the style of where the music should go.
That's amazing to start that early.
Okay, Annie, one more question.
Okay.
We're gonna wrap up.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question. Have you been directing during COVID? I mean, have you been directing TV during COVID, either of you? Or have you? Okay. Well, then I won't ask my follow-up to that question. I'm gonna ask, I wanna end on a question of self-care, because we all need extra self-care right now. And I wonder, because, you know, everything that's going on in the world aside, this career can be exhausting. And I'm just wondering what kind of things you've developed, if you're comfortable sharing, if you have any rituals or anything you do to make sure that you nurture yourself through your journey.
Intermittent fasting. Said intermittent fasting. So I started doing intermittent fasting just so I don't start eating at 7 a.m. and just eat for 14 hours. Or whatever it's called that.
Yes. Yeah.
I know. I think I have the COVID 10 pounds basically happening. But yeah, the self-care, it's been challenging. It's been challenging, to be honest. And I mean, again, the spaces, the sisterhood, the tribes have been really critical. Being able to talk to folks and be very transparent about, you know, if you don't want to talk about film stuff, that's cool. You can also talk about the fucked up stuff in the world, you know, and to be able to commiserate in some ways has been healing too. And I've just really just carved out time for myself with my family, my child, my wife, and making sure that we go visit the ocean as much as we can, to try to center ourselves. And it just shifts, you know, it's just trying to find what will work next week. It's never sort of consistent. It's just because at this point, like, I don't know what curveball is coming, and they've all been really big and they've all required different things. So, but yeah.
I mean, yoga, I will say, I mean, like, I think the hardest thing, like, is figuring out how to be like, take care of yourself physically when you're shooting, you know, like, and just like those like 20-minute yoga videos or something on YouTube, or like, you know, like the little thing you can, if you can, it's so hard because these days, shooting days are so long. We all know this, right? Like, it's so hard to like actually balance. I mean, any kind of semblance of like work-life balance. I don't know how that's achieved during shooting, but at least if you can create some time, 20 minutes for yourself, half an hour for yourself before you start shooting. I mean, before the start of a shoot day, like that is the greatest gift I find, if you can do that for yourself. Do something, meditate, whatever it is.
Wonderful.
All right, thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Come to our watch party this Saturday, October 3rd. This was brilliant, really, truly. I can't tell you how much I admire and respect each one of you as filmmakers. Like, some of your films are like my favorite of all time. So this is kind of like mind-blowing for me, and I think for some of our audience members, just to have this time with you. So we're so grateful, especially nowadays. So we've got to wrap up so everybody can get back to their busy lives, and y'all have a lovely evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.